Hi, my name is J.W. Verrett. I'm a professor of forensic accounting and corporate securities and banking law here at the George Mason University School of Law. I also lead Veritas Financial Analytics, a company of academics who are economics academics, finance, accounting, and legal academics who work together to provide litigation support in both uh, civil, commercial, and criminal cases. We're the only expert witness firm owned and operated by only professors of law, economics, finance, and accounting. Today, I'm going to offer you a short lecture and essentially just a primer to help attorneys learn how to harness the skill set of forensic accountants when they need to estimate economic damages in litigation. So let's jump in, shall we? I'm going to have 2 points of focus today. First, commercial damages on the one hand, and individual economic damages on the other hand. Different breed of animal, whether you're dealing with commercial economic damages or individual plaintiffs' economic damages. Damages and the estimation of damages is an optimal kind of problem to give to a forensic accountant, a licensed forensic accountant. And the work that they do is going to be governed by generally promulgated standards under which they'll operate. Now, that's going to help you with Daubert. And the role of a licensed forensic accountant and the credentials given to a licensed forensic accountant have a long history of support in Daubert cases. So that's by itself one of the reasons why you want to use a licensed forensic accountant to help you in estimation of economic damages as an attorney when you're bringing tort or contract litigation or things of that nature. What are the credentials you're going to be looking for? You're going to be looking for someone who's a CPA, Certified Public Accountant, who also holds the credential of CFF, Certified in Financial Forensics. That second one is given on top of the CPA to people who hold the CPA credential, and it's given out by the AICPA. Other related credentials might include Certified Valuation Analyst, the ABV designation given by the AICPA, or the CFE, Certified Fraud Examiner designation, which is not for CPAs. But the core really is the CPA and CFF together is how you know that you're working with a forensic accountant who's operating under a set of standards that's going to meet that Daubert review with a well-tested list of cases holding that the CPA CFF designation and the standards promulgated by the AICPA for forensic accountants are going to help you meet Daubert for the purposes of an economic damages estimation. Let's start with individual economic damages. So I'm just going to walk through the kinds of things you'll see in a report for an individual plaintiff's economic damages estimation. These are the kinds of things you'll see in a report on the plaintiff side. You'll see comparable things on the defense side, trying to counter some of the points made in the plaintiff side's economic damages expert. So first, you'll start with an introduction to the facts of the individual plaintiff. And you might have some history of their earnings, their job, the type of job they do, the type of work they do, the plans for this individual looking forward, and how long they intended to work. So the introduction will help to set up the framework that comes in the report for the estimation of individual economic damages. The core of a report for an individual's economic damages will be the earnings history of that individual. Now, the forensic accountant is going to need some time and is going to need to do some diligence and going to need some paper from the attorney. It's important as an attorney to contact your expert early. Give your expert the time that they need. Give your forensic accountant the time that they need to conduct necessary diligence and to build a report that can survive deposition. They need time. If you call them a week before the expert report is due, that's not enough time. That's not enough time. So they need time to get the expert report done. They're going to need a history of earnings of the individual plaintiff. That probably starts with pay stubs. That starts with getting a hold of W-2s. Tax returns are useful, but tax returns alone are probably insufficient if other things are available. For one thing, tax returns are probably not going to show all of the income. Tax returns are not going to show non-taxable income, certainly like retirement benefits. And individual businesses sometimes, for whatever reason, they just don't report all the income. Or maybe the accounting measurements used on the tax side are not the same as the accounting estimates like depreciation or whatever else that should be utilized for an economic damages calculation. So tax returns are useful. Corporate tax returns for an individual sole proprietor might be useful, but other indicators might be necessary to get a full picture of earnings, particularly non-taxable earnings, or to measure earnings in a according to accounting estimation methods that are not the same as tax accounting. Business records, bank accounts to follow any changes in assets or proceeds of loans that can tell us something about an individual's non-W-2 earnings. 1099s are useful. And then, in addition to those historical numbers, you're going to want to your forensic accountant is going to work very closely with economic data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS data. That's going to be your forensic accountant's best friend in trying to estimate future earnings, future lost earnings for the individual plaintiff. So you're going to be, your forensic accountant's going to consult Bureau of Labor Statistics data pretty directly to get indicators of local wages, to get indicators of wages associated with a particular job, to get indicators of if your individual is not a W-2 employee, they're a 1099 sole proprietor, or sort of someone working on side jobs. Your forensic accountant is going to need to know the percentage of time used during the week. Maybe they don't work a full 40-hour work week. Maybe they work more. Maybe they work less. BLS data can help you with that. BLS data can help you to get an hourly rate for this individual. And then you want to know something about broader trends in the region to get an indication of lost wages going forward. You're also going to want to take a look at the percentage of disability for the individual plaintiff. So basically what you're building here is, because of you want to build a picture that shows because of the wrong, the contractual wrong, or more often for the individual plaintiff, the tortious wrong, because of the wrong from the plaintiff side, you're building this individual is this percentage disabled going forward and therefore unable to work either totally or partially. And because of that, lost wages, lost earnings going forward constitute this. And for that, you need an hourly wage. You need a percentage of the week that they are working. You need to understand trends in the region and in the particular industry in which they work to understand, to develop a reliable and trustworthy estimate of growth in those earnings going forward that would have accrued to the individual but for the tortious wrong or the contractual wrong that was done to them. So for all of those kinds of questions, essentially, you're going to be relying on Bureau of Labor Statistics data at the core, and you're also going to be using other data particular to the industry. Maybe you're looking at trade journals. Maybe you're looking at data from the Chamber of Commerce for that particular region. Other factors to keep in mind. Again, you're looking at work capacity for this individual. Many plaintiffs are not going to be 100% disabled, and so you're only going to have a portion of lost wages. Or you might be looking at measuring the delta, the difference between lost wages from the job they were doing previously and the actual wages available to them from the second best opportunity they have to work given their disability. And the difference between those two is the estimate of lost wages that resulted from the wrong that was done to them. Your forensic accountant is not going to make a medical assessment independently, but they're going to have to rely on potentially another expert, whether it's a medical expert or potentially a vocational expert, for a very, very brief, narrowly scoped opinion about that can get your forensic accountant to an estimate of the percentage of disability that is going to be that's going to be used in the model going forward of lost earnings. In addition to lost earnings, obviously a part of the damages award that a plaintiff will be seeking will be reimbursement of medical expenses. And that's not something primarily for your forensic accountant to opine on. However, your forensic accountant can be useful in kind of getting all the bills together, taking the estimates from a medical professional, and conducting a net present value calculation to determine what those future medical expenses might be worth in present value terms. And for example, they might use an appropriate discount rate to apply a net present value calculation to bring all of those amounts into one monetary award today to help to pay the plaintiff for the medical expenses going forward that might be necessary. So your accountant will not be the primary estimator of that. Your physician, or sometimes there are registered nurses that also serve in the capacity of expert witnesses. Or you might just have estimates of bills from the medical provider directly going forward. Maybe a letter from the doctor, if that's all you're able to do, that says, here's my estimate of going forward. Or you'll consult sources, if necessary, for the cost of primary care from the market. And in that case, if you're not relying on a medical professional, you're just relying on quotes from available market providers, your forensic accountant can help to compile that information. And then their primary role will be selecting the appropriate discount rate to conduct a net present value calculation to determine those future amounts. So that will be on top of the lost earnings calculation for that individual. Other issues to keep in mind: projected work hours are important. You will look historically to work hours, in order to maintain a reasonable going forward estimate of lost earnings. It'll need to be pretty closely linked to some evidence of historical work hour utilization. If they were a kind of a journeyman, kind of a sole proprietor that was only working 30 hours a week, you can't estimate going forward 40 or 50 hours per week to determine a lost earnings calculation. They need to be grounded in historical fact. Also, you need to come up with an estimate of future working life. How long is this individual going to work? And there again, Bureau of Labor Statistics data can be helpful in this regard. You can get tables of how long an individual tends to work given a certain age by percentile. So you can get the average future working life of someone of that particular age, and then you can get a 75th and 25th percentile. So for example, someone who's 60 years old, I think the 75th percentile, the top 25% of people who work a long time tend to work to about 72. So you might be able to get 12 more years of working life in a future projection out of someone who's 60 years old, if you can show that they're in that top percentile in terms of their tendency to work going forward. And that's one of the matters that's going to be litigated back and forth between a defense expert and a plaintiff expert, whether those future working life estimates and the future weekly hour utilization are reasonable estimates as a component of the model. So those are items in the model that are going to be litigated back and forth between the two experts on both sides. So what you ultimately come to is, on the lost earnings side, is a future projection of lost earnings using an appropriate growth weight in those earnings, using an appropriate weekly hour utilization, using an appropriate future working life for a number of years. And then you're going to do net present value calculations for each of those individual years, add those up, and that's using an appropriate discount rate. And there'll be quite a bit of litigation over the appropriate discount rate to use. Obviously, if you're on the plaintiff side, the plaintiff is going to tends to argue for the lowest discount rate they can, because that decreases future amounts by the lowest percentage. The defense side will tend to try to argue for the highest discount rate that they can, but ultimately the question of the discount rate to use will be about the financial fundamentals of the interest rate environment at the time, generally in the economy, and particular to the region in which the individual plaintiff was working. On top of those individual lost earnings models, you will add direct expenses to be reimbursed, including future medical expenses, using potentially outside experts like a medical expert. You will factor in, you will subtract from lost earnings any actual earnings earned from another job they can get, or potentially, depending on the jurisdiction, subtract out disability benefits as well. And then in addition to that, a third category you might be able to obtain in damages awards, depending on the jurisdiction, would be the value of household services provided. So this is, for example, if the individual plaintiff did the shopping for the house, or sometimes you can also include childcare. If they're no longer able to provide those free services to fellow members of their family, you might be able to obtain an amount for that. Essentially, the method that most jurisdictions use will be a market method. You look for what it would cost to get that service, to hire that service out, and then estimate those amounts into the future. But you'll need to show those household services were actually provided. You're not going to be able to include in household services leisure. So, for example, if it seems like what you're describing is more leisure time than chores around the house, you won't be able to recover for that leisure time, but you can find a reasonable number for household services and recover potentially for future lost amounts from the provision of household services. This will typically be the smaller portion of the total recovery award. You're talking about something like $30, $40 an hour, $50 an hour maybe, for a few hours a week that you can show this individual is actually providing household services, or was providing before the injury related to the tortious or the contractual wrong, probably tortious wrong. So that hopefully provides an overview of the basic core points here: individual economic damages from lost earnings, individual medical out of cost expenses, and future medical expenses, and then the value of household services provided. Other points to make just generally about working with a forensic accountant with an individual plaintiff. It's important to work with your expert early. It's important to provide your expert with all the information they need. I started this discussion talking about from the plaintiff perspective because they generally have kind of the first step in calculations. But on the defense side, and at Veritas, we've done work for both plaintiff and defense side, depending on whether we feel like we can provide value in a case and whether we can have a credible opinion for a particular position. On the defense side, you're typically playing mostly a responsive role to the items contained in the plaintiff's report and providing some litigation pushback on core elements of the estimation, including whether the discount rate was appropriate, whether the weekly work utilization was appropriate, whether the working life assumption is appropriate, whether the growth rate in future wages is appropriate, whether or not this individual could have a second job that could recover a lot of the lost earnings and therefore reduce the estimate of the damages award. As forensic accountants, we don't touch the question of pain and suffering and that component of a damages award. That's just not something that we have the capacity or the expertise to provide an estimate of, to provide a number for. But we can be useful as forensic accountants in litigation for the core issues for individuals when it comes to estimating lost earnings, when it comes to estimating and potentially compiling medical out-of-pocket expenses and future medical expenditures, particularly applying the appropriate discount rate to those future estimated expenditures. We can be useful in finding a good rate and a good hourly rate and a good utilization percentage for the value of lost household work, and help to make sure that the number is right at the end of the day. So that finishes the lecture on and the primer on individual economic damages. We'll have a second lecture on commercial and business lost profits and economic damages to supplement this lecture. I hope it's useful. I hope you'll reach out to us at Veritas, J.W. Verrett at veritasanalytics.net. Email me anytime. I'd love to help with your case and talk through some of the issues with you just in a free consult. Thank you for listening to our lecture, and we hope to help you in the future.